What up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Live Better, Sell Better podcast. This is your host, Kevin Dorsey, aka KD. And today, we're going to get our ninja on. Today, we're going to be talking about speedos. Today, we are going into an absolute masterclass on sales because I have Marcus Chan with me today on the show, which I am pumped for because not only is he a fellow LinkedIn top sales voice of 2020, but he's also someone who I believe 100% has deserved that award because not only does he have one of the most clever and eye-catching taglines on LinkedIn, which we'll talk about here in a second, right? From speedos to seven-figure contracts, but also because Marcus understands people. This is what makes him great at sales. He understands psychology, mindset, behavior modification, influence to the level where it's one thing if you're good at it, it's another thing if you can make other people good at it. And that is what he does. He coaches sales reps now, helping some of them double, if not triple their income by following his proven process. And he's here today to share that process with us. Marcus, welcome to the show, my man.
Hey, Katie's my absolute pleasure. Man, you really built me up. So let's lower the bar before we dive in deeper. I'm excited to be here, man.
And the beauty is all truth, right? There's nothing in there I said was wrong. So we are going to do this, man. So what I like about this show and what a lot of people come for is, we get right into it. No fluff, no backstories. We're just going to talk through it. And so what I actually thought would be a good way to start this off is, where do you see most sales reps go wrong? We're going to get into what to do, but sometimes we can learn from what the wrong. So of the thousands of reps you've worked with, where do you see most of them go wrong when they're trying to sell?
Yeah, 100%, right? And I think it's very simple. A majority of reps who are struggling, they focus so much of their energy in how they pitch and everything else. They focus 100% on themselves and their company, when that really is not as relevant as focusing on the person you are meeting with, that prospect. And that's where when you look at top reps do the opposite. They focus entirely on the customer, the prospect, and what they need, and very little on themselves. And they know only once they've earned the right will they position their offer. So that's a big mistake I see all the time across the board.
Right. And that's a perfect segue though, too, right? So everyone kind of says that, right? Focus on the prospect, talk about their needs. What does that actually mean? So I'm going to break this into two questions. How do you focus on the prospect? And then second, you said earn the right to give your offer a pitch. How do you earn the right? So start first with the focus on the prospect. What does that actually mean? How do you tactically do it? Then we're going to talk about how to earn the right to sell. So let's dive into this.
Yeah, let's dive deep here, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm a firm believer. If you don't get the answers you want, you have to ask a better question, right? It's classic Tony Robbins, and that's no different for sales professionals. And that really starts with your ability to ask the right questions with the prospect, whether it's a cold call to the discovery, right? So let's talk about the discovery to be specific here, because when you're in that appointment with the prospect, you should really, especially that first meeting, right? Assuming it's not a one-call close situation, or even if it is, it doesn't matter. But your goal should be asking the right questions to really uncover what they are all about, if it's going to be a good fit for what you have to offer, right? And I'm sure we'll dive deep into the questions, but that's absolutely vital, because only then, once you uncover it's going to be a good fit, can you earn the right to present your offer. Because if it's not a good fit, it doesn't make sense to even present your offer, whether it's that call or any other call, because frankly, you'll end up wasting their time and your own time. I mean, it's important to qualify, but it's just as important to disqualify prospects from your sales process as well.
Mm-hmm. And so in your eyes, is there a difference between qualifying questions and good questions? Because I think a lot of reps, right, they ask their qualifying questions and they feel like, Marcus, I did it. I asked good questions. Yeah. I went in, I asked good questions. They are qualified. Now I can pitch. What's the difference between a qualifying question and some of the types of questions you're talking about exposing, need or a want there?
Yeah, great question, right? So I think a lot of times it's reps kind of box themselves, right? They're like, hey, I did Medic, I did BANT, I did these frameworks. Like everyone's got something. I'm like, that's cool. That's like the bare essentials. It's kind of like if you're going to go and you're trying to find your life partner and you got at least a minimum bar you want to cross, and that's it. But it doesn't mean that's who you marry. Okay.
Right.
You
Right.
want to be able to go deeper. And in reality is you want to uncover certain things. And I make it very simple. You want to understand the whys and the hows, right? Why they buy and how it helps. And it's for across the board for anything. Even if they say, hey, we have X budget. That's cool. Why do you have a budget? And how does it impact the business? Right? And that's across the board. And when you start thinking this way, the whys and hows, you start uncovering different things. So if you uncover why they buy, for example, if they have a curtain vendor, why do they choose that vendor? How they go about choosing them? What made them stick with the vendor? What was the criteria aside from price? You start understanding some of the psychological needs that they have. That's usually beyond just band, medical, or any other sales process. You start uncovering how they think. And of course, the why and the how also varies depending on which buying influence you're meeting with, because each of them may have their own. So your ability to navigate that and ask those deeper why and how questions helps you guide to say, hey, you know what, this is a really good fit because I can satisfy not just the basic needs, but also their true, deep psychological needs that's going to help them with whatever they're shooting for.
No, I love this. And so I knew we were going to get to this rabbit hole. I didn't even have to set you up for this, right? So now you're using some of my favorite words, right? We're going to get into psychology here a little bit, right? So let's talk about the psychology of buying and influence in sales. What are some of the key things you learned about how our brains work that you apply into selling and influencing people to make a good decision?
Yeah, 100%. I think the first piece is when I was studying and learning this, right? Because first off, when I started in sales, I was like the pitch monster, right? Like knock on 100 doors, door to door, make 100 calls, do all these things, pitch. Hopefully it'll close. It's a numbers game, whatever, right? And I struggled, right? Now, the mistake early on was I focused on how can I influence people? How can I get them to do what I want, right? And that's really the wrong mindset, right? The mindset first should be how can I influence myself first internally to become the best version of me, because only then when I can lead myself can I influence and lead others. And that's whether it's with leadership or with prospects. And that's where it begins with first, by working on my own personal self-awareness and being really aware what I was doing. Was it the right behaviors, wrong behaviors? And then by understanding myself, that allowed me to put myself in a prospect's shoes and say, how can I influence that behavior? And here's a really simple example. I'm a pretty high energy guy. I bounce off the walls. Some prospects, especially if they're kind of stoic, are very turned off by that. They're like, oh, who's this guy? He's bouncing off the wall. He's got too much energy. He talks fast. They're stonewall. Now, average reps, if they acted this way, would just go in and they're like, they're in there, they're bouncing off the walls and et cetera. They're trying to sell that way. By understanding myself more and being more self-aware made me realize, hey, you know what? I can still be my authentic, true self, but I do need to adjust how I work with that prospect now. I also need to be very careful depending on how they mentally process stuff on the vocabulary I use and what I actually do. So for example, if I'm working with a CFO, which typically they are obviously more numbers driven, more analytical in general, right? That's how they usually process. If I come in there and I'm meeting with them and I'm just using words like, this is incredible and amazing and fantastic, and this will solve all your problems, they're going to look at me like I'm crazy. But understanding how they process, and they're usually more factual based and like numbers, certain things, I need to adjust my words as well, showing precise, detailed calculations or proof to showcase my offer. And when you start, and this starts with yourself first. When you focus on yourself, understand who you are and how you're portraying yourself, then you can start focusing on other people and say, okay, you know what? Now I can start adjusting my style to really cater and fit that person. Now, of course, there's psychological principles that kind of apply across the board. That's good for overall influence. But the key is if you want to not just get people to like you, but get them to buy from you, you need to understand how you are and how you impact those people and what they are like.
So what triggered that journey or that switch, right? Because not a lot of people that I get to talk to have as many books behind them as you do, that talk about learning the way that you do, that talk about self-awareness the way that you do. I watched your webinar over the weekend. I got a little taste of like your backstory. Like, What triggered that though? Because that wasn't who you always were. That wasn't how you always functioned. So what was that, either like that moment or individual or trigger event that said, whoa, like I need to be better in order for my results to be better?
Yeah. So, I think, when you graduate college, right? I graduated college and, I was pretty like confident in myself, right? Probably a little bit egotistical. You think you're bulletproof and you're like, you know what? Like I did pretty well in school. I graduated, I did these things and I'm pretty proud of myself of what I accomplished out of college. And going into like a real job, okay, no longer like, standardized testing, right? In a real job and failing and getting punched in the face over and over, made me realize pretty quickly, I'm not that great. I'm not that great. And I needed that. I needed that humbling. And at that moment when I struggled, right, I really struggled because I was terrible at sales. I struggled for weeks. It made me realize in that struggle, in those dark moments, and this is in the last recession, in those dark moments when I thought I was probably gonna get fired or I was gonna have to quit, get a new job, and I was just struggling. And I was really questioning myself as, as a professional, a human being. Could I even do this job? I questioned myself, and I realized in that dark moment, if I wanted to achieve more, I had to become more. And I started to feed my mind. I started realizing very quickly, I had to become the version of myself that deserved success, right? That earned success. I was still a entitled 21, 22-year-old who just thought the world was going to be given to him, So I realized that moment, I'm like, man, I saw things through a small lens. Because in my mind, I'm like, I grew up so poor from my parents and, being one of the first kids to graduate with a college education. I'm thinking to myself, I'm on top of the world. I'm already ahead of the game. But I really wasn't. So that was important. So at that moment, I started throwing myself into self-development and personal development. Like I obviously read sales books and, Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, all those normal ones. But I started becoming obsessive about personal development, about becoming the best version of myself, about who I wanted to become down the road. Like I had this like, big goal in my head. I'm gonna retire when I'm like 45, 50 from corporate America. I'm gonna do whatever I want. But I also realized if I was going to do that, I needed new mindsets, new ways of thinking, new values, new beliefs, new habits, new routines in order to get to that level. So I started obsessively throwing myself. I started spending money I didn't have and investing into conferences, events, buying books, doing whatever I could to consume knowledge, but also execute on the knowledge. And that was really cool. And I started seeing some results at first, right? And what's really interesting is like, over the years, like I think the first 4 or 5 years, I started having some pretty good success. And that was neat, but I didn't really realize the power of it. And then fast forward to about 2015, at this point, it was about 2015. It was about, 8 years out of college and working. I'm like, at that point is when I realized I had become a different version of myself. I had no idea. It was like a slow transformation over time because people started asking me stuff like, hey, how did you get promoted like 10 times already? How'd you do that? You're making all this money. How'd you already do this? How'd you get promoted? How'd you do these things? You seem to be in peak, mental shape. Like, how did you get here? I'm like, I don't know. I just started reading books and going to conferences. And that was an aha. And people were saying you should write books, etc. So that was the moment though. In 2007, it was when I started to work myself. The failing moment was when I made a realization, but I didn't even realize how my mind had shifted until almost a decade later.
I love it because it is, people look at overnight success, but not pay attention to the 10 years of nights that led to that overnight success. Now you said something I think was interesting, and it's a funny anecdote from Grant Cardone, who I have my own thoughts about. I don't know how people listening think about Grant Cardone, but he said something that really stuck with me. He was talking to 2 young individuals, and one of the guys goes and was like, I've got $1,000 in the bank. What should I invest it in? And Grant goes, what do you mean, what should you invest it in? He's like, should I invest it in stocks, bonds, real estate? He's like, you invest that in yourself. You're already broke. You might as well make it official. Like that $1,000, there's nothing you can do with that $1,000 in an investment right now. He's like, go buy a book, go buy a conference, go pay a mentor for 5 hours of their time. Like that $1,000 isn't going to do anything for you right now. Invest it in yourself. You'll make that back faster than
Right.
any other, call it scheme you can think of. And I always love that because he's like, you're already broke, make it official.
That's right.
Like you already only have $1,000. Might as well zero it out on yourself, because I think that's where so many people miss, especially salespeople. They jump around, they look for a better job, a better territory, a better pitch, a better objection handling technique, and never focus on them being better. And so I hope that's a takeaway people get from this, is like investing in yourself pays for itself better than any EFT stock or bond you can come up with. Like it's so important. So I hope people take that away from this. And so let's go to this next part then, right? So you went on this journey, you started to get better. And with that, you started to see your results go up. Mm-hmm. Why? Because people started to say, well, yeah, sure, cool. Like, all right, you're better now. What did you start to change in your pitch, right? So earlier we talked about questions, asking the right questions, starting to learn a little bit more about them. Okay, I've learned. What changed in your pitch then to start closing more of these deals?
Yeah, great question. What I started realizing was everything affects your close rate. Everything.
Yes.
And before, when I first started, I'm like, oh, you know what? I need to get better at closing, handling objections. Yes, the fundamental blocks of closing, yes, for sure. But I started realizing, because it's kind of like you start being able to work backwards. And you know what? If there's like different parts of the engine, I can refine all the parts of the engine that leads to an overall sales process, from the point of they know nothing about me into that awareness stage to generating that interest all the way through. They're all different parts of the bucket that I can start refining and working on, right? And I'll give you an example even from my own business, okay? So like for my own business, like the close doesn't happen at the close. The close happens way before. And we start thinking this way. It's like, you know what? Like when I put out there quality content like you on LinkedIn, I know it's going to help my audience. It will also nurture my audience. So you're already increasing your close rate by putting out quality content, okay? Mm-hmm. And then every little piece adds up, right? You start realizing, you know what? Okay, you know what? Even how I go onto KD's podcast and have a conversation, how I show up, good or bad, impacts my closing ratio. Mm-hmm. That all ties together. If I come up here and I just say fluffy things, hey, yeah, see more people. Yeah. People sell to people. Yeah. I'm real general and we're not tactical here. Then people are like, that only hurts my close rate, right? And you start realizing, okay, that means when I make that first outreach, that first call to them, if I'm not properly prepared, like your post today, if I'm not properly prepared for that call and I sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, shoot, that impacts my close rate, even if I get the appointment. If after I send an invite to them and even I spell their name wrong, again, that impacts my close rate. And you start realizing every part of your process, right? When you have that first sales call with them and you're not prepared. You don't have questions ready to go. You're not asking the right questions. You're all over the place. Again, that impacts your close rate. So all these things start realizing very quickly all impact your close rate. And it's not just at the close and the pitch. The pitch is definitely very important, and being able to align what they want, need, and really desire to how you can solve the problems and more. That's obviously very important, but the close is the entire process. And when you understand it that way and you work on refining every part of the machine, you'll automatically start closing more on the back end. Here's a really simple example. Right? Like I remember early on when I first started, like I'm going into these meetings and I'm just like, my questions are like, I feel like I'm just, shooting from the hip. I'm asking all types of questions. They give me a response. I'm like scrambling, and you walk away not knowing if you even did a good job or not. Versus if I actually walked in and I have a list of questions, it doesn't mean I interrogate them, but they're a framework for me to follow in case I black out in that appointment, which we all do. But now I say, if I black out, boom, no problem. I go right back to my list. I can make sure I keep the cadence of the flow of the conversation. So by doing stuff like that, that all increases your closing ratio. Like at the end of the day, the close isn't lost at the close, right? It's lost before that. So if you do the things right on the upfront, it only puts you the highest likelihood of closing once you earn the opportunity to actually ask for the business.
No, I agree so much. And this is, I think, the shift in a lot of like the call it seller education nowadays. We start to understand this. If you go, I started with Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, Harvey McKay, like all these old school guys, and it was like closing techniques.
Mhm.
And, here's how you close someone. Whereas now we completely understand, like, the close is actually, in my opinion, by the way, I think the close is the easiest part.
Yes.
The close technically is just asking for the business, which a surprising amount of reps still don't do. They still don't ask, will you buy? There's a better way to ask it, but y'all get what I'm saying. Like, we hope the buyer will say, okay, how do I buy? And so for everyone listening, by the way, that puts up too much pressure on the buyer to make the decision. They should be able to buy by saying yes, not asking you how to buy. But the close is the easy part. It's setting someone up to close. Now, you mentioned something that's there. In this pitch, the wants, needs, desires. How do you weave that in? Because so many people, especially in the software world, especially, once that pitch starts, it's all about the product. Yes. It's this feature, this button, this gizmo, this gadget, and the wants, needs, desires disappear. Yeah. How do you weave that through a product pitch?
Yeah. So I think the first piece is you think about any type of software. There's so many. There could be literally hundreds of things you want to hit on, right? And especially if you have an engineer with you, where it could just get controlled by the tactical details, in which now you're only probably selling to maybe one possible buying influence, right? So you want to take a step back, and the way you want to picture this, it's like this. Picture whatever software or whatever product you're selling is like a buffet line, a buffet full of food. They don't want all of it. You know what you want, but it's irrelevant. Based on the prior discovery and the means you've had, what did you uncover in the buffet line that you want to point out? That's really important, okay? That's the first piece. And then as part of it, it's just having a very simple framework of, I say, hey, you mentioned earlier, A, B, and C is important to you. Their whatever needs, wants, desires. Here's this feature that will help you achieve that. And in reality, out of the 100 features and benefits that you might have, they may only care about 5. So there's 5.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in there real quick. Could you say that one more time for the people in the back real quick?
100%. So you say, hey, earlier you mentioned that A, B, and C is really important to you. Here, based off of that, here is this feature right here that helps you accomplish those objectives. And then wait, what do you think? Can you see how it's taking care of this for you? Just make sure before you move on to the next one, okay?
Mm-hmm. Right, they get the buy-in, but what he said there, y'all, and it's so important, you don't have to show everything. Right. Salespeople across this country lose deals over features the buyer didn't care about. They didn't care. You didn't have to show it. Only show the things that actually you can tie back to their wants, needs, and desires. So I had to jump in there because that's something that so many reps 100%. Miss. You don't have to show everything. They don't buy everything. They buy 3 to 4 things. That's all they want.
That's exactly right. I mean, what you have to picture is, you talk about, like, if you watch any type of martial arts, most people know about, pressure points. Okay. Pressure points causes your opponent to go down. Right. And I don't want to make it like an adversary thing when you're not fighting your process. The point is they have certain pressure points. Just point out those ones. Okay. Yes. Whatever's important to them, whatever drives that button, whatever gets them excited, that's the one you want to focus on. And if you have multiple people on that demo, make sure you cater to those people, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's the mistake I see some people make is like they go into like a demo and maybe they only met with one person before in discovery. Now there's like 3 people or 4 people or more people on that demo, and they have no idea what those other people are wanting to see out of the demo. So now you're only selling to one person. They walk away and the other 4 people are like, well, didn't meet my needs, even though it could have, but they just have no idea.
Mm-hmm. And a real quick tip there too is you start talking about like meeting with multiple people, and Sam McKenna, who we had on the show earlier this year too, talked about this a little bit, is if you have a champion, prep for that meeting with them. Don't go in blind. Don't go in like, okay, I don't know what everyone cares about. Meet with your champion. And this also, by the way, will let you know if you actually have a champion. Because if they're not willing to meet with you beforehand, it won't matter. So you have to find out what matters. And I always recommend you need to find out who's the domino. So yes, you need to, involve everyone, but who's the domino in that room?
Yes.
Who, if you get to fall, everyone else falls with them. And oftentimes they're the quiet one. They're the one not saying anything. And so finding that person out. So with this, right? So we've talked discovery. We've talked the pitch and the close a little bit. Let's spend just a little bit of time on objections. What's your approach to dealing with some of like the common objections, not interested, pricing, not now? Like, how do you encourage your students to handle those types of things?
Yeah. So I'll say first off, 99% of the time, the first objection you get is a pure smokescreen. You just have to understand that. You just have to understand, like, you will get objection. In fact, you should get objection. Objections help you navigate the sales process even deeper. Okay. And it's very simple. So first off, whatever objection they give you, just agree with them. Just agree with them. Like, oh, you're too expensive. I can see how you feel that way.
Yeah.
What are they going to say? What are they going to say?
Yes.
Like, I'm not interested. I can see why you would say that. What?
Yes. Like finally someone's getting into this. Yes.
Yeah. Just agree with them. Like, because maybe you don't understand. That's okay if you don't personally understand. Like, I don't understand why someone doesn't want to buy, but I can agree with them. Okay, sure. I can see why. Doesn't mean I agree with you. Just agree with them, right? Say, I get it. Makes sense. But then you go deeper. And the magic comes in the next move, which is really, you just really need to clarify down what is really on their mind. If they say, for example, hey, listen, KD, your product, your program, your software is just too expensive. The mistake many reps make is they start trying to justify it. Just slow down. Hey, I can see why you'd say that, KD. Notice a change in my tone, by the way. I can see why you'd say that, KD. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that? And just wait. Well, it's just, it's more than we expected. Again, that's still super surface level. It's an onion. That's like one layer deep. What do you mean by that? And you just start going deeper and deeper. And they might eventually get to the point where they say, hey, listen, well, here's the reality. We thought it would be $1,000 a month, and your program is $2,000 a month. Okay, tell me more. Go even deeper. Like, what does that mean? Like, because just because there's a delta still of $1,000 does not mean it's not a good fit. So you need to understand what's really on their mind, because prices is an easy smokescreen, and you go even deeper, and you might cover, well, yeah, we only budget 1,000. But we're not able, we just have no more budget, and 1,000's really it. Okay. I can appreciate that. Aside from the $1,000 difference, is there any other reason that you would not move forward with our program today? And you just make sure that's the only objection. Now, they might throw you another one like, oh, well, I'm not sure about this 12-month contract I got signed with you guys. Okay, tell me more about that. Again, clarify. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that? We've never signed anything. We're a startup. Sure, I get that. Tell me more. What does that even mean? Mm-hmm. I'm just not sure where we're going to be even 6 months from now. Tell me more. Well, hey, you know what? I think our worry is, just what if we're not here? Tell me more. Well, I don't want to be personally stuck. So if I understand you right, you're not worried about the contract. You're actually worried that if in 6 months or 3 months or 1 month, if your business is not viable, suddenly you are personally held liable to the software we're going to sign you up for. Is that right? Yes. So now we're getting to the real money, right? So I showed that as an example because your response is not as important as you understanding what the actual objections are. Because your response then can be a variety of things depending on how you sell and what you sell. And that's where the mistake many people make is they have the response in their mind already, but they might be putting the wrong response in front of the wrong objection. And what you really want to do is you picture it this way. It's like you're driving down the road. Your windshield is dirty. And as you get objections, you keep trying to drive and you're going to run into something. So you got to clear the objection. The questions clear your windshield. You open up the objection. You get a clear view of the road. And then you handle the speed bump or you go around it. And that's how you actually deal with objections, because then from there, you can re-showcase value on why it's worth the extra $1,000, why they shouldn't have to worry about this. Because objections really are, hey, show me why X is not an objection. Show me why we should still partner together. And your ability to uncover the objection is really important. Then it's about dealing with it after you uncover the objection.
And something very, well, I guess I'll call it subtle because I don't think a lot of people will catch it, but I know it's very intentional with you. And I hope everyone goes back, listen to the tone switch, because your tone switch was perfect. What most sales reps do when they get objections, they actually escalate tone, right? So you're talking to them like, oh, it's expensive. Well, I mean, it's worth it. I don't think I can do it, but I mean, you probably could. And we start working up. You went back. It was like, oh, tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
What does that mean? And you pull people in. So it's being very mindful of your tone. And like, I love like talking with like sales pro, because like we can't help but get into mode.
Oh yeah.
You're not even dealing with real objections right now, and you can't help but tell me
transition, right?
Right. You just get right into it. So it's fun to watch and to see this. And I hope people back up. Listen to him, how he's talking normally. And the moment he thinks he's handling an objection, how his tone switches, it becomes a much more of a talk to me tonality. And that's what helps pull things out. So that was a masterclass in tonality there. I love that.
So check out this really ninja move. I think you're going to appreciate this, right? This is super ninja, right? So I have an extra technique that allows the prospect to sell themselves out of the objection. Would you like to hear it, Katie? Do you want to hear it?
I would love to hear it.
I figured you would, right? So you go through kind of normally, you empathize with them, you clarify down, you isolate down. So let's just say they say, you know what? Yeah, it's really, we aren't able to get more budget. We just can't, right? And that's the only thing, right? Before you respond, just pause and say, you know what? I get that. And you just ask them this. Hey, Katie, remind me again. What did you like most based on what we've discussed so far? And wait, and let them start telling you, well, we liked this part of your software. We like this and this. Great. How will that improve your business? Oh, well, it's going to improve by this and this and this. You mentioned earlier that you guys have to make a change. Isn't it worth the extra $1,000 to address these issues you've already had? Yes. So now you're getting them to sell themselves, and you may not need to even handle their objection.
You tie it back. You tie it back.
You tie it back. Get them to say it. And after they say it, say, well, clearly, this is a no-brainer. Should we go ahead and just get you going right now?
Yes.
Anyway, that's it.
Yes. Now, this is perfect, y'all. I hope you hear it, because remember earlier when he was pausing during his pitch where he was showing a feature and then going, what do you think about this? How does this compare to what you're doing? How would this impact your business? He already knows the answers to these questions. So by the time the objection comes up, you're able to go back and say, hey, well, hold on. How many more deals did you think you would close if you had better training? Or how much time did you think you were going to save? Right. Or like we talked about this, and it's bringing it back. Most deals are lost because people forget why they needed to do it in the first place. Not because they couldn't afford it or they didn't have budget. They just forgot. Why am I doing this?
100%. Well, you think about this. When you're going for the close, right? It's uncomfortable for a prospect, right? We've all been there. We know we're about to get close for anything, right? As on the opposite end, and you tense up. You tense up, right? And your primal lizard brain kicks in. It kicks in, and you're like, it makes you want to pause. So you need to, and at that point when the lizard brain kicks in, they have forgotten everything you discussed earlier.
Exactly.
So you need to bring them back into the state of where they want to buy, right? Not to be sold, but where they want to buy. put them back in the buying state. And that gives you the opportunity to be able to, hopefully earn the business that same day.
If y'all want an extra little brain ninja trick there, this is why descriptive language is so important. If you can use very descriptive language of what they'll experience, see, or feel, it shuts down the logical part of the brain. It activates the emotional part of the brain, which is actually how we make decisions. So this is where, as salespeople, and even dealing with that, that pesky CFO we talked about earlier, where it's only numbers. Yes, but if you can paint a description of what those numbers are going to be and how they'll go, it lights up the front of the brain. That's what you want lining up, not the lizard brain in the back. You want the front. So be descriptive as you go into this. And so, and actually
100%.
with that, I want to ask one quick question here around, we've talked a lot about kind of tactics and techniques, which is great. For the sales leaders that are listening, how can they better coach this? Right? Because they might hear this and go, oh yeah, that's great. And they sprint out to their teams like, guys, I've got it. This is what we need to do. And then no one does it. Yeah. How can the sales leaders be better coaches? Because that's something that I think you're really great at. It's one thing to create a cool program or a great course, but you're actually able to get people to do it and succeed with it. So for the coaches listening, how can they be better coaches with what they're learning right now?
Yeah, great question, right? And I'll say, even before I started my business, right? I was leading teams, big teams like you, and you realize pretty quickly, your ability to influence your team to perform it's vital to your success. And it's not as simple as, let me get on a soapbox here and say, hey team, hey, we're going to be better at asking questions and listening and watching your tonality. Well, most of them are just not going to perform. Okay. So the first thing is it's very simple. Number one, are you showcasing the behaviors you expect as a leader? Like, that's vital, right? That is so vital. And the reason I bring this up is so important, where I see a lot of leaders, as they progress in their career, they get further away from the field, right? Like, if you're running a training meeting, are you role-playing with the reps while you acting as a salesperson, showing them the behaviors you expect for anything you are training on? That's the first piece, right? And letting them be tough on you. Like, you want them to give you the worst objections, because there's a few different reasons why it's important. Number one, when you do that, it revalidates you still got it, okay? And number two, it instills belief. And leadership is a transfer of belief. So your ability to transfer belief into your people depends on how you lead. So by showcasing that behavior is really important. And then number two is making sure, like, if you're in the field with the reps or on the phones with reps, having them see you do it live and coaching, guiding as well. It's so important. Like, I'll have reps where I show them in the classroom, in the office, and they go, oh, it's cool, whatever. We're in the safe zone. Then we go in the field, and I do the behavior I expect. And when they see it, boom, when they see it work, it's amazing. Because it's like they get to see that progress for their pipeline, and progress is the ultimate motivation. So that's the first piece, is just showcasing and doing the behaviors. Okay. The second thing is when you are wanting to improve your team, you got to seek to understand first. It's not as simple as saying, hey guys, I noticed our closing ratio is down. I'm going to need you all to ask for the business 5 times every single day. That's very transactional. Mm-hmm. Before you assume that, yes, you have the numbers and the KPIs and you look at, but seek to understand what's really behind the numbers, because numbers can deceive you as well, because anyone can position numbers in a different way. So going to seek to understand and seeing live what's really going on. Like, I've always been a firm believer, the answers lie in front of your people. Like, if you have a rep who's struggling to book appointments, sit with them on the phones, listen to their phone work. If they're struggling to field to close, go with them in the car. Back then, go in the car with them, see what they're doing. See how they run their calls, not as in a checklist way, but as a way to support and engage the troops. Lead your troops from the front. And when you do that, you will see the results are increasing and skyrocketing as a result. And I did this across the board where, with all my teams, where they're used to an armchair quarterback. But once you start showing them that you are 100% invested in their success, not just by what you say, but what you do, you'll see the results start improving, especially when you showed you are truly committed to their success, understanding their obstacles, helping remove them, coaching and guiding for performance. But what I love about you, Katie, is it's not just sales skills, but life skills. Get them better at life. And when they do that, they're going to be more in debt to you and be more open to all types of coaching, whether it's about money, their mindset, family, relationships, whatever. And as a result of that, it'll compound and it becomes, you build a tribe of people that will follow you wherever you go.
I love that, man. And especially as we're getting close to wrapping up here. I mean, that is what it is all about, right? That person in salesperson, right? It makes up more letters in that word salesperson. And it's actually the most important part. The better the person is, the better the sales, and your own journey actually showed that, like, to the letter. So, all right. So we got two final questions here. And they're my two favorite, right? We've been riffing for about 45 minutes now, right? We've covered a lot. You have dropped some gold on everybody. Should they forget everything except for three parts about how to be better at sales? What would those three tips? What do you want them to remember? They forgot it all, but they're like, actually, I learned these three things that had an impact. What would those three things be you'd want them to walk away from this conversation?
Man, okay. It's a tricky one. We dropped a lot of bombs here. Okay,
yeah,
so
I know.
I'll say, number one, right? Re-listen to the tonality that's being done across the board, especially objection handling. Okay, that's the first piece. Just understanding that. Okay, the second piece is understand, even from a sales philosophy perspective, your whole sales process impacts your actual close rate. So if you are not closing, it doesn't mean you're a bad closer. It may mean you have other parts of your process you want to really work to improve. And by understanding that gives you allows you to take a step back to realize that. And then number three, if you want to become better at sales, work on becoming the best version of yourself. When you become the best version of yourself, that will lead to you being able to earn more clients and customers and to hopefully lead a happier, more fulfilled life across the board outside just sales.
I love it, man. It's a perfect segue to the last question, right? Because the name of the podcast is Live Better, Sell Better, right? Focusing on that person, salesperson. So what would be that parting tip in terms of what is the life tip here? How to get more fulfillment, how to have more energy, how to be a better version of yourself. What would be your parting advice there?
Yeah, so great question, right? And obviously there's so many different things out there. I would say be 100% mindful in protecting your mind space and your head space. And what I mean by that is being very careful with what you consume and who you consume it with. So for example, I don't watch the news to my detriment, probably to my own detriment realistically, but it serves me better to not watch the news because I know it's biased whichever side you fall on, does not matter. So I don't watch the news. I'm careful with what I consume, but also this ties into who you get advice from, right? Like I'm a firm believer, only take advice from people who have achieved what you want to achieve on a consistent level. That's so critical. It's kind of like, I'm not going to get, workout advice from someone who's out of shape. It doesn't make sense. I want to get from the guy or gal who's been, in peak shape and condition for years, right? So again, you're protecting your mind space. And it's so vital. And when you do that, you start realizing very quickly, okay, well, I can only take advice from certain people. I'm going to listen to KD. I'm going to listen to Marcus Chan now. I'm going to listen to these people. Cool. Commit to that and make it very narrow your focus down to those people. Don't overwhelm yourself. Protect your mind space. More is not better. Less is more. Narrow your focus, protect your mind. And when you do that, you're more likely to execute on what you learn to get the results you're actually looking for in your life, your relationships, sales, whatever you want to improve.
I love it. And he snuck a little word in there towards the end, right? Which is execute. If you're going to listen, if you're going to learn, if you're going to read, if you're going to observe, execute. So my man, this flew by. I'm actually shocked that we're already at time here. I was like, man, I got more I want to dive into, but how can they get more of you, right? Where can they find you? What do you got out there? Like, how can they get more of what you're putting out right now?
Awesome, man. Appreciate that, Katie. So obviously you can find me on LinkedIn. The only speedos in the tagline. You could also head to marcuschan.io/resources. That's marcuschan.io/resources. Tons of free content in there, resources, webinars, etc. All designed to help you sell more, sell better, and live better too.
Hell yeah, my dude. Thank you for your time, your energy, your insights. This was great. I'm definitely going to have you back, man, but I appreciate you.